Well, we talked about on this show the latest news that Florida is going to be investigating ivermectin for cancer. They're actually opening their own research saying it's good for Floridians, so they want to make sure they want to try it out themselves. There's not much money in it, and that's why Big Pharma won't test it. And so the state is doing it on their own, which seems like a pretty brilliant idea considering, for one, ivermectin's been very much demonized. We saw this very much demonized throughout COVID. A lot of pharmaceutical companies kept saying, "Oh, this is just a horse medication," when it absolutely is not. And a lot of that demonization was obviously because Big Pharma cannot make any money on it, and then they pumped out the vaccines and they pumped out Paxlovid and whatnot. Well, ivermectin has been, yes, it originally was and developed and known as an anti-parasitic, but it is shown to have perhaps a lot of miraculous other uses, and those uses should be explored. One person really exploring those uses is Dr. William Makis. He is a Canadian radiologist, oncologist, and cancer researcher with over 100 peer-reviewed publications. He currently operates the largest ivermectin cancer clinic in the world, where they now have two published peer-reviewed papers on the use of ivermectin, menbendazole, and fenbendazole in cancer, including 3 patients who were stage 4 and are now in long-term remission. Pretty amazing. Dr. William Makis, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Let's start off with this Florida announcement. Seems like pretty big news. How do you feel about this, the state jumping in and saying, we're going to do our own research on this?
It's very exciting, and you're absolutely right. It is big news. This kind of research is research that the big cancer centers should be doing, all of them, whether it's MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Dana-Farber. They should all have been already doing this research for many years now. Ivermectin in cancer is not controversial. There are over 400 preclinical studies now published on the use of ivermectin in cancer, and many of those studies say we must do human trials. There's too much evidence here of efficacy and response. And the problem is the big cancer centers are not doing any of it.
Why are they not? That's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because I think we can all understand why Big Pharma doesn't want to do it, right? I mean, ivermectin is, what's the word for it? It's like generic now. Like it's no longer, they can't make money on it.
Yes,
is that right?
Well, you could say it's off patent. Yeah.
It's off patent. Okay. So I understand why Big Pharma, although you think that they would still do research on it and because they'd want to develop their own similar, I guess, but then we would never know about their research. Maybe they are doing that and they're not telling us. But the cancer institutes, that's interesting. Why do you think, are they bought off? Like what is their reasoning?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty simple explanation. The big cancer centers operate based on guidelines, and these guidelines are provided to them by the big institutions in America, like the American Cancer Society, the American Association of Physicians, and so on. And unfortunately, all of these associations, medical associations, institutions are funded by Big Pharma. And so what makes it onto these guidelines? It's medications that are expensive, medications like Keytruda, Kisqali, Opdivo. These are medications that'll set you back hundreds of thousands of dollars per year if you're a cancer patient. And so those are the drugs that make it onto the guidelines. And as many cancer patients learn, oncologists are not practicing the science and art of medicine anymore. They haven't for decades. They are basically pill pushers who follow very strict guidelines to push certain chemotherapy, certain immunotherapy, or radiation therapy. And if they veer off those guidelines, they could get in trouble with the medical boards who are also influenced by Big Pharma. So it really is heavily influenced by Big Pharma and what drugs are on the market right now that are making a lot of money for them.
What can somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, what can he do? Is there something that could be done at his level that would sort of break up this kind of like it's almost like an incestuous monopoly that's gone on where Big Pharma is just controlling everything and they're in bed with everybody. And I mean, even from the research institutions at universities, right? I mean, there's a big problem there because Big Pharma's or people that are backing Big Pharma are giving them a lot of money. So it's kind of this incestuous Like, seems like the science community in that way. What can somebody at his level do? Is there anything?
Oh, absolutely. So you can look at what Governor DeSantis has done in Florida, along with Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo. What they've done is they've come out and they've expressed public support for this kind of research, for research in ivermectin, mebendazole, and other antiparasitics. And then they allocated the money and made the money available. And you know, it's a sizable amount of money. At least $60 million has been set aside to research repurposed drugs. And Governor DeSantis and his wife, Casey DeSantis, announced, I think, close to $300 million in just broader support for cancer research in general. So they can put their political weight behind supporting such initiatives. There may well be federal funding available for such research projects as well. And I can tell you, you know, those of us who are working with these repurposed drugs, we exist. And for example, I was invited to Florida to give several speeches, share the stage with Dr. Joseph Ladapo, the Florida Surgeon General, and really, give like a teaching session to those who attended as to how these repurposed drugs work, how they can be used. They're very safe. I mean, if you look at ivermectin, 4 billion doses have been prescribed to humans. It has never been, you know, just a horse dewormer or sheep dewormer. It is a human medication that won the Nobel Prize in 2015 and is currently on the WHO list of essential medicines, as is mebendazole, the other antiparasitic that I'm working with in cancer patients. It's also on the WHO list of essential medicines, but you never hear this in the media. And so this is why political support is so important, is they can come out publicly, give the support, provide some funding, and allow those of us who are already doing the work to participate in the research, conduct these trials, get them published, and move cancer treatment forward in a new direction.
I wish they would study so many other things, like even just vitamins or even just
Absolutely.
sitting out in sunlight. Like, what does that do? You know,
Absolutely. And I can tell you,
doing.
I can tell you, Kim, vitamin C, vitamin D, I mean, these are key components of my protocols as well. You know, and there's other supplements and even, you know, herbals like sweet wormwood, Artemisia annua, which is also has won the Nobel Prize and is used by WHO to treat malaria, for example, extensively throughout the world. So there's so much opportunity for researching repurposed drugs. Metformin in diabetes has anti-cancer activity. Aspirin has been found to improve survival in colon cancers recently. So there are opportunities here, and we just need the political support. And Florida is really leading in this regard. I'm so excited. You know, I've been to Florida recently. I'm going back again. I've given speeches, and there's such tremendous support for moving cancer treatments in a new direction. You know, everyone wants to put out the latest cancer drug or cancer vaccine, mRNA cancer vaccines, for example, that are going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, because unfortunately, a lot of cancer researchers backed by the medical establishment and big pharma, they've got dollar signs in their eyes. They want to make money for shareholders. But if you put patients first, then you see things like what's happening in Florida, where there's excitement to take, you know, cancer in a new direction.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Governor Ron DeSantis has been fantastic when it comes to health. And I mean, just having Dr. Ladapo as the Surgeon General of Florida, what a great pick. And just during COVID, I felt like DeSantis did. I felt like he really handled it, I thought, the most appropriate way. Even just basic stuff like who's going to get the vaccine first, right? Like all these other states were saying, give it to the grocery baggers, like the 20-year-old grocery baggers. And Ron DeSantis was like, why don't we give it to everybody 65 and older? You know, like the ones that are dying. That just made the most logical sense. You know, just with absolutely everything. I don't like Ron DeSantis in a lot of things, but in this particular arena, I think he's really, really leading the way and been really just common sense stuff. I do hope that other governments do this, or just, you know, state governments, but also maybe even foreign governments. What about China, for example? Are they doing studies on things like this? It would seem like a government like China would have more reason to want to study the cheaper drugs. And I don't know if they have like a big pharma problem like we have here in the United States. So I'm curious if they've done, or if Russia, for example, some other, or India, I would imagine would be like the hotbed of potentially studying things like this. Are there studies that have gone on with other countries?
It's actually a very interesting point you bring up. When I look at the research, and again, as I said, there are 400 publications in ivermectin in cancer for its use in cancer, most of them done in the last 5-6 years. Some of the studies have been done in China. I really haven't seen studies done in India or Russia, but China does seem to have a support for this kind of research. Now, again, it's sort of backed by institutions that ultimately report back to the Chinese Communist Party. So, that's not the greatest thing. But
well, I mean, it's better than big pharma. I mean, I would trust the Chinese government when it comes to trying to keep their people healthy than big pharma and what their advice is, right? I mean, no matter what we can say about the Chinese government, they certainly have an invested interest in a healthier population that doesn't cost them a fortune.
They really do seem to support research that goes beyond big pharma. There's no question about that. And so, but again, we should be doing that kind of research here in the United States. Right. I always say that we should not only be doing all the necessary research into ivermectin, mebendazole, other antiparasitics in cancer, but really we should make these drugs available over the counter. They have a safety record established for 40 years now. 4 billion doses given, extremely safe, safer than Tylenol, safer than aspirin. And so they should be available to every American in high purity, high quality, over the counter, no prescriptions necessary. Right now, access is a problem. Now, even though these repurposed drugs are much, much cheaper than anything that's being offered by the large cancer centers, and so you're looking at treatment costs in the hundreds of dollars per month, as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars per month. It's still, difficult to access for some people. And so, again, there are states that are leading in this regard that have made ivermectin available over the counter. Tennessee, Idaho, several others now. And so we are moving in that direction. But I think the United States should lead in that. And I'm very excited to see that Florida is leading in that direction.
Okay, let's talk about the specifics. What is ivermectin? What is mebendazole? And what is fenbendazole?
So all three are antiparasitics. The ivermectin is used for certain, hookworms, pinworms, certain parasites. And fenbendazole and mebendazole is a class of antiparasitics. It's a little bit different from ivermectin. They're almost identical to each other, the fenbendazole and mebendazole, but they have different mechanisms of action in cancer. And, I can't go through all the mechanisms because there's over a dozen mechanisms that have been proven in preclinical research. But when you look at ivermectin, for example, ivermectin blocks tumor proliferative pathways. And there's a pathway called PAC1 that leads to either malignant tumor growth or benign tumor growth. So a lot of people don't know that ivermectin can not only shut down cancer growth in many cancers, but also benign tumors like fibroids, like lipomas, meningiomas. And so it has a very strong anti-proliferative sort of tumor growth shutdown mechanism. Ivermectin also inhibits and kills cancer stem cells. And cancer stem cells are the reason why chemotherapy doesn't work in 97% of the cases. Mm-hmm. Cancer stem cells are cancer cells that exist in tumors, but they're not rapidly dividing. And so chemo kills all rapidly dividing cells. That's why it hits your bone marrow and brings your blood counts down, is because it's hitting all rapidly dividing cells, whether they're malignant or not, but it ignores cancer stem cells. And those cancer stem cells can remain dormant for years. And then one day, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, they start proliferating again, and they can spread to different parts of the body.
Now, and that's why people have cancer, then suddenly they're like, I guess they call it in remission. Do they never say, because I don't know, do they ever say someone's cancer free? Like, oh, it's gone, it's clear. No. Like they just say you're in remission.
So oncologists are very careful not to use terms like you're cured of cancer or you're cancer free. They will say you're in remission. And because they know that invariably many times the cancer will come back because these cancer stem cells start replicating again and they spread to other parts of the body. So now you have metastases. The other thing that you will see is whenever you get chemotherapy suggested by an oncologist or prescribed, they will never say, or almost never say, it's curative. This is going to cure you. They're going to say, we cannot cure stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We cannot cure stage 4 ovarian cancer. So they will never describe chemo as curative. Again, because of the situation where these cancer cells come back and the cancer comes back, they will say it's palliative. We can give you extra months or years of life, but we can only, put this cancer in remission for a certain period of time. So they use the terms palliative, not curative. And I believe when you add ivermectin into these regimens, and again, you don't have to necessarily, stop the chemo or stop the immunotherapy or targeted therapy. You can add ivermectin mebendazoles to your existing oncology regimens, and the ivermectin will now kill the cancer stem cells. So we see very, very powerful results when patients combine chemotherapy with ivermectin or mebendazole, for example.
I think that's a super important point to make, which is, so people, it's not like they have to choose one or the other. So it's not like, oh, my doctors here, my oncologists here are saying, do all of these treatments, the classic, like what they give to everybody treatments. Yeah. So, but I want to do, but, I like what Dr. Makis says, and I'd rather, they don't have to choose.
No, and again, it's up to the patient's personal decision. If they want to go with the standard regimens, chemo, radiation, immunotherapy, you can just add the ivermectin and mebendazole or fenbendazole to those regimens, and you will see better results. And this is what's happening right now is I'm getting shocked reactions from oncologists because they've never seen those kinds of results. Sometimes the cancer disappears after 2, 3, 4 chemo cycles, and they've never seen it in their careers. And they'll tell the patients, I've never seen this in my 30-year career. So you don't have to make that decision. Now, some patients do choose. They say, look, I cannot handle chemotherapy. The side effects would be far too severe, or I don't want chemotherapy. This is not what I believe in. And then they can still do an ivermectin, mebendazole, fenbendazole protocol on its own. But we do see enhanced tumor reduction and cancer cell killing when you combine all of these things together.
Okay. Do you see a difference between those who do the combination versus those who forego the traditional, mainstream path and go in this direction instead?
It's hard to tell right now. That's why we need this kind of research that Governor DeSantis is funding right now in Florida. I have thousands of patients. Right now we're following over 6,500 patients that I've been helping over the past 14 months. But we need to see longer term how these patients do. Now, I can tell you the patients who do the combined treatments where they sort of put everything together, they seem to get into remission faster. You see this tremendous cancer cell killing, the tumors just melt away, and they do seem to hit remission much faster. But again, there's pluses and minuses, right? If you do go the chemotherapy route, you may do some damage. Mm-hmm. For example, to your, immune system, your blood counts, maybe you'll irritate, your liver and kidneys. So it's always, you have to weigh the pros and cons. But one thing I want to tell you, Kim, is that patients come to me almost always very, very late after mm-hmm. they've exhausted, the 4 or 5 lines of treatment that the oncologists have at their disposal. And then the oncologists tell them, sorry, we have nothing left to offer you. So patients are coming to me very, very late. And then there's still a hope that I could perform a miracle, or that these medications, ivermectin, mebendazole, can perform a miracle when it's very, very late stage 4. The cancer has spread to the bones, liver, brain.
Right.
It's very difficult to deal with the cancer at that point. Whereas when I have cancer patients who are stage 1 cancer patients, for example, I've had prostate cancer patients who've taken ivermectin, fenbendazole for a few months and are now cancer-free, never did radiation, never did surgery for their prostate. They just avoided that entire process altogether. Or breast cancer patients, when they come to me with a very large tumor in their breast, they take the antiparasitics for a few months. And then when they do go for their surgery, the tumor is very small. The tumor's disappeared from the lymph nodes. And now they can be downstaged. Instead of stage 3, they're actually stage 2 or stage 1, and they could maybe avoid some of the additional treatments that the oncologist might want to do afterwards, like harsh chemotherapy. So come to me earlier. Try the repurposed drugs earlier. Don't wait until your oncologist tells you have 3 months to live.
Right. I mean, that's. I would think a lot of people do come to you at that point, and that's challenging in so many ways. For one, it's bad for the research, right? I mean, it's like, I mean, if you come to me and you're already on your deathbed, I mean, then and then when it doesn't work, because nothing would work for you at that point,
Yeah.
then it kind of makes the ivermectin look bad, right? Like, well, see, it doesn't work.
Well, and you know that's the argument that's sometimes used, but
It's
these
like nothing else
doctors.
worked either.
But
I mean,
that's
at
the
this
thing
point,
is these doctors who attack the antiparasitics, they don't realize that a lot of these patients have been given a death sentence, have been sent home to die. They've been told you have 3 months left, 6 months left, and in some of these cases, we can still put them into remission. So, you know, this is
right?
something that we would study. You know, you've got $60 million for research. You can look at various things. You can run various trials. You can look at using these antiparasitics early on, stage 1,
Yeah,
stage 2, see how those patients do. And then, of course, we can look at stage 4 and see if we can really turn hopeless situations into remission, or maybe even cancer free, maybe even a cancer cure. I don't like to use the term cancer cure because we need, of course, evidence that this is the case over 5 years, 10 years of follow up.
right.
This is why our fenbendazole study was so important, because we had up to 3 years follow up that not only did these patients go from stage 4 to cancer free, but they stayed cancer free for up to 3
Mm.
years afterwards. And we were the only group outside of the Stanford University Medical Center who have published in this area.
Wow.
So that's why the research is so important, so that we can prove these things that I'm seeing in my clinic.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.